Okay, welcome to now on Bulletproof Backs, but we've had some great chats with some different people, and I know this one, organising this one with you has been, I don't know, I've forgotten how many months in the making, but here we are. Would you like...
The universe has decided today.
Yes, the window, the stars have aligned. Would you like to introduce yourself to the listeners in any way, shape or form that you think would be relevant to the audience?
Okay. Hi, everyone. My name's Gary Ward, and I teach anatomy and something I call anatomy in motion. So I'm very interested in the moving human body. And just for the record, Marion and I have known each other for 4 years.
Yeah.
I think so. So you joined us on a course in 2016, I think must have been.
Yes, I'm not good with dates, but about 3 years, I'd say, about clearly.
16 or 17. Anyway, it's that's where we started. So I'm an educator and was traveling internationally to educate my own ideas in anatomy, which derived from me having a fascination in feet. I'm the author of a book called What the Foot as a result of that, which I just thought was a cool title. But it's led to everybody thinking about me as a foot specialist, whereas I prefer to think of myself or to think of the foot as part of the whole body. And so a better understanding of all of the parts means we can understand the whole body to get better. And the big piece of the pie for me was spending the time many moons ago, it now feels like, mapping the journey of every single bone and joint through the human gait cycle, which is us walking, taking a footstep. And so to be able to monitor, for easy listening, to be able to monitor the journey of a pelvis and what direction it's going at what moment in time as the foot is entering into the ground. And to be able to break the body down into its 3 dimensions. So we have forwards and backwards movement, sideways movement, and rotational movement. And so every structure, every bone, and every joint can be described with its journey in these dimensions. And the beauty of all of that is that we can begin to observe human walking as simply a series of big whole body movements, which can be organized well or disorganized. And it seems to be that the difference between organized well and disorganized points a finger at people's discomfort. And so quite by chance, really, I was able to observe someone's posture and say, do you know what? It looks like if you were walking, you would fall heavily on your left leg if you lived in that posture full time. Well, that's actually what happens. I do. I live heavily in my left leg. And to be able to say, well, I wonder if we could create the opportunity for you to land with more weight on your right leg and take weight off your left leg. You would be able to adopt this other posture, which is not the one that you currently hold. So we'll try that, and we tried it, and suddenly there's alleviation in the person's symptoms because they've taken pressure off the problem. And human walking is really a behavior. It's a pattern, a repetitive pattern, a habitual state, and a behavior that we don't think about every day. We just get out of bed and we go to work, or we do whatever we do, and we do it in the way we know best. And it seems strange to think that the way we know best might be the way that's causing us trouble. But having adapted to injury, having adapted to pain, having adapted to even working habits or sporting habits, we have found a way to operate best and organize ourselves in a way to walk. And that is working inside a posture. So we're walking in a way that be putting pressure on certain areas and not using other areas of our body that might be beneficial to us. And then that habit is created and we never use those areas of the body again. So the idea was that we could use these patterns to say, look, I can see that you are not able to, and then you can fill out all the columns. You're not able to bend your spine to the right. You're not able to twist your spine to the left. You're not able to flex your hip and bring your right leg forward. Your right foot doesn't move how it's supposed to. your left shoulder doesn't. And then little gentle exercises, we can call them exercises, more I have to think of them as movements, where we can be nice and specific about teaching the movement, so that the person can begin to experience parts of their body that they're not used to experiencing. And then the brain, if it likes it and sees value and they feel confident, they feel safe, there's a benefit to these movements, will slowly move back towards it. And then moving away from where you were, which was discomfort, towards something you feel safe and confident now doing that you might not have before, is to begin to take pressure off the areas and the problems that you have in your body.
Yeah, and I love, Gary, your body of work just, I found it, I discovered it online, and after, but trained as a physio, done multiple other courses, and, I think I saw one of your videos talking about just that simple concept of, are you loading one leg more than the other? And I reflected instantly on all the patients I'd seen over all the years, that I could clearly see that they had a hip replacement on the right hip, the right knee, the right, everything on one side. And they would say, I have all these problems on one side, and
yeah,
it's just such a simple concept. I remember physically feeling, I felt ill, actually. I felt nauseated at the fact we had overcomplicated something so simple as a profession, and that in 4 years at uni, that whole concept had never been exposed to me. So there was a bit of anger, there was nausea, it was a visceral reaction. And but also, what follows that is just thank God here's a body of work that is so logical, that makes so much sense, that combines all these other things that I've already done, but puts it into a mode of assessment, an assessment and a treatment all in one, that a patient can grasp. That's not about, single joint focus. It's the whole of who we are. And, I'm well and truly the biggest fan of your work. And if we think about it, like you said, in terms of pain, even that philosophy that when a movement hurts, it's our body trying to communicate, don't do it that way. Maybe there's a better way. But what I think is, I don't think people are aware that there's these other options. They've got so habitualized in certain 3D directions, so those planes of motion have been in their brain shrunk. And so that neuroplastic idea of, well, let's let them feel this or feel that. And, our system moves towards pleasure and away from pain. And I really just think people, they're trying to move away from pain, but they don't know what they're moving to. And that creating those new links for them is just that, it's a learning, isn't it? We're learning and re-educating and giving the brain new options. And it's beautiful.
There's a flip side to that as well, Marion, which, our thing's all about finding center. There's like two sides to everything. The flip side to what you just said is that, because if we're not aware of the things we can't do, we're only aware of the things we can do. And so when we look to do any exercise or any movement or any even healing of our problems, we're still only able to move in the realm that we know how to. And so without being pushed out of it, we just stay in it. So our rehab stays inside the frame of movement that we have. Our exercises is happening in the frame of movement. If I make this a little bit more real for people, one of the things that we do as a nice way in is to stand people up and ask them where they feel the pressures on their feet. And so, for instance, if somebody is to have the majority of their weight in their right heel, so they might feel like they're quite in their right leg and not much in their left leg, but actually the weight's more in the heel and less in the forefoot, and a bit more in the left heel, but not as much as the right, and therefore nothing in the left forefoot. That actually creates, if everybody who's listening to this was to stand up, they would find that the pelvis would slip off back towards the right, as if we were stood on a clock face with 12 in front of me, 6 behind me. I've just fallen backwards into my 4 to 5 space on the clock, and adapted my upper body. My spine leans a bit. It can't be straight anymore. My head angle has to change. Shoulder rotates a bit. It just has to organize itself in order to manage your mass. And now my point being is, you wake up one day and you're not very comfortable and you're in this position and you decide to go to the gym, and the person says, you know, what we need to do is to strengthen your core, do some squats, stabilize everything. And you're going to stabilize everything. Sorry to remind you of days gone by. You're going to stabilize everything in those footprints. So I'm going to get stronger and more stable with all my weight in my right heel, still with no awareness of how to get into my left forefoot. Now I'm getting strong with my spine in a funny position, stable, and not for long, because something will break. There's always the straw that breaks the camel's back, as the phrase is. And so we're going to end up causing ourselves an injustice somewhere. Like the people say to me, you know, having bad posture or not being aligned or balanced is not indicative of pain. Like, you don't have to be. If you are imbalanced, it doesn't mean that you will have pain. That we know that. But if you up your ante, this thing called rate of change, if we increase our activity levels exponentially on such a posture from nothing to something, that's when stuff starts to show up. You're likely to then feel, I don't know, this is about back pain. So all of a sudden, the bend in the spine, the pelvis being more over to the right, creates an area, one side of the spine, that's under more pressure than the other. And so when you go to the gym, you do your squats, you put some weight on, over a few weeks, you build that up eventually. And then now you're at the physio, and now you're rolling it with a foam roller, and you're having some massage and you're having some nips. But every time you get up off the bed at the end of the session, your weight's still in your right heel, not in your left forefoot, and you're walking the pattern straight back into the system. And this is, you know, you wanted to talk about chronic back pain. Chronic does not mean the amount of discomfort that you're in is chronic. Chronic is by virtue of time.
Yes.
And so if we all our time in those foot pressures forevermore, the amount of range that we have in our body and the amount of possibility that we have in our body in that structure is vastly reduced. As you already said, that people don't realize the shrinkage that's coming out of being stuck in these habitual movements. And so we've trained inside that structure. We're now treating inside that structure. We're then giving up and trying to rest inside that structure. Now we're laying on the bed in that structure. So at some point, someone has to come along and show you another way, quite literally. And it's a pattern interrupt. It's to be able to say, you know, because at the moment you're swinging that left leg forward, but it's only going forward half as far as it should, when the right leg is the one that's doing it because you're happy bearing weight on that side. So to re-educate that's a rotation of the pelvis, getting the weight into the left foot. How does the left foot interact with the ground? What new habits can be created there? What timings can be changed? What sequences can be reintroduced? And all of it is picked up by the nervous system. All of it is picked up by the brain's awareness of, and almost choice between, well, I used to do this and it's led to some discomfort. But if I do this, things feel a bit lighter, things feel a bit easier. Maybe we should do this. But as I wrote down here, you've only got two legs.
Jeez, wait. Let's stop and let people absorb that.
What a mind-blowing statement. But we all put our weight on one, or in 1/4 of a quadrant. And can we at least spend a little bit of time making sure we're balanced in two? Can we spend some time, like, if your pelvis can go right, it should also be able to go left. If you can bend right, you should be able to bend left. And everything is binary. That's what I love about this work, we're stuck at one end of a binary scale, and that just creates limitations. Because if you are more rotated to the right in your spine, you know that your ability to rotate both left and right has to be compromised. The only way you can maximize that is if you're nice and centered. And so to gently do movements, not just rotational movements, because people have been doing that in the gyms and training environments for years, but to recognize that there is a sequence, there is a way of rotating, there's a way of making sure that every vertebrae is rotating, not just chunks of your spine, that there are sequences and relationships above and below. So what does the neck do when you rotate your spine? What does the pelvis do when you rotate your spine? when the pelvis responds, what do the hips do? What do the femurs do? How do your knees go? Are the feet able to join in? And through the exploration of this work with this model, we have been able to literally map, is the word, track the sequences that run from big toe all the way through the rest of the body. So when we want to create a movement in the pelvis, we know what we want the foot to do on the left, we know what it wants it to do on the right, we know what we want the shoulder girdle to do. And these lovely flowing movements, whole body work, can begin to give you access to these shapes and these spaces that you didn't know you couldn't access before. And by virtue of not knowing you couldn't access them, you 100% didn't. And that possibility that we want to be able to create for the people that we work with.
Yeah, and you've thrown the word pelvis in so many times just in that little snippet. And, you know, when I'm dealing with clients about their backs, no one has ever mentioned the word pelvis. And I think the language, certainly in my profession, you know, everyone talks about this disc, that facet joint, you know, you know, this sacroiliac joint. And you'll never get someone coming in and saying, I'm aware my pelvis is locked in left rotation. You know, the language needs to evolve. And instead of this fixation on the injury, there's little awareness in even my colleagues, even surgeons particularly. There's very poor understanding across the board about a pelvis as the foundation for what we're asking a spine to move. And as you would know, the pelvis is limited by what the feet can do. So everything is interconnected. But, you know, it's really interesting. I start some patients just with a simple exploration, like in your Wake Up the Glutes series. What is a pelvis able, or should it be able to do? Like even that, like, do you know your pelvis has 8 possibilities? Well, let's see what they can do, you know. And because if this foundation on which our spine sits is not able to move, then we can guarantee there's going to be a lumbar or some disorder higher up. So I think it's kind of frustrating because your body of work is there, you know, there's answers, there's solutions, there's a simplicity to understanding of how we move that hasn't kind of filtered out yet in a broad enough sphere. And I personally get a little bit frustrated with that because I see people, they're trying, they really want to be out of this pain, but they're getting the same messages from the same people, like, you know, strengthen your core and your spine will be better. And, you know, it's just, it's not that simple. And in fact, it's simpler, you know, strengthening your core takes a bit of work, but learning how to move into one foot is much easier. It's faster, it's quicker, and it's less effort. So I think it's my eternal, well, I'm hoping and evolving that the more of these chats that people have, that there's a growing awareness of your work and that more therapists are on it.
Is the goal. I was going to say something. I have a nice, please don't let it disappear from my head. What was I going to say? It has gone. Something to do with what you were just saying, slightly post pelvis. The pelvis is like you were saying, we need to get that pelvis to create a nice level playing field. And that's what I wanted to say. So, but in order to be able to explore what that means to have a level pelvis, you mentioned that the feet have a relationship, the spine has a relationship, etc. The body's kind of as well, exactly the same as the last discussion. So we talked foot pressures. If the foot pressures don't change, the structure doesn't. So then you've got a pelvis. As a result of now being in that right heel, the pelvis is over to the right, possibly rotated to the left, possibly a little bit higher on the right-hand side than the left-hand side. Maybe it's got a tilt in it. You can see that, wow, there's quite a lot of stuff going on in the pelvis just because I've got my weight in the left heel. So I can't get my weight in my left forefoot, which means I can't get the pelvis over to the left. I can't let it rotate to the right, struggle to tilt it on that side. I'm still locked in that position as well. And if we talked about squatting or exercising in that position, if I now go out to stabilize my core, but we're doing it with a pelvis that is over to the right and tilted.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's now the baseline. So here's a little wooden thing.
Yeah.
That's the pelvis. The spine is, it doesn't matter who you are, the amount of range in the lower part of the spine compared to the upper part of the spine is significantly reduced. So you always have what I call an inverted T at the bottom of the spine where it meets the pelvis. So if your pelvis is resting like this, the spine's heading off over there. Because most people don't walk around like this, brought themselves back over here. And so now we're leaning over to the right just to get back on top of my pelvis, bringing more weight over to the right leg because we don't like to be on our left leg. And now we're going to try and stabilize in that space. But if we talk on like an engineering level, that spine with all of its segments, 5 vertebrae in the lumbar, 12 vertebrae in the thoracic. If my spine is like this and bending over to the right, I have all of those joints in between the 5 lumbar and the majority of the lower ones in the thoracic on the left-hand side are going to be blown wide open. And if they stay there full time, we should finish that. On the right-hand side, they're all going to be nice and compressed because they're basically like this. So the right-hand side is all compressed, the left-hand side is wide open. They describe the disc as the jam in the donut. So the jam gets squeezed out of the donut out to the side, or worse, pinched on this side. And you have what's called a compression problem on the right and a tension problem on the left. That's how I frame it in my mind. And so did we have a disc problem? Do we have a back problem? Do we have a pelvic positional problem? Do we have a foot pressure problem? It's a whole body problem.
I would love I'd love to see more diagnosis come in about, a foot pressure problem or a pelvic problem. But I don't mind that. That's my job to, okay, yeah, this is the.
I called that the therapist's use.
Sorry, you go.
I called it the therapist's utopia, which is where we've educated the client to such a level where they walk in one day and you go, I've got discomfort in my body. Something somewhere is obviously not working right. Would you help me find out what it is? That's the therapist's utopia. And not my back hurts, fix me.
Yeah. Surprisingly, I actually think the patients start using that language really much more rapidly than their so-called educated colleagues. Like I had a girl today, had a lateral ligament issue on one side of her ankle, was clearly shifted heavily onto that side. We spent a lot of time reconnecting her back with her opposite foot. And she came in today and said, it's really great. My right ankle hasn't rolled, but I can feel now issues in the left side of or the opposite side of her spine. And she goes, but I can understand that if I haven't put any weight through that part of my spine for so long, that there's going to be an adaptation process. And I was just like, great, you nailed it. So what do you think we should do? And she goes, well, I think I'll try and move left. I'll move into that foot when it feels okay. But if I get pain, I think I'm just going to go back sometimes and spend a little bit more time. So great, you're in so, it's not rocket science, and patients pick it up much quicker than people with preconceived ideas of how we should work or shouldn't work. And there's an uncertainty. Yeah.
Many people who do the Wake Your Body Up program, you were able to converse on a level of understanding about the body in a way I can't converse to a new student who's come into the course to learn. He's interested, but has spent years in other areas. So the unlearned patient, if you like, or client is actually they're an open book, and it is quite easy to educate. And I think people are actually interested in what their body could do, especially if they know that it can help them. So that's certainly a space I enjoy. And the Wake Your Body Up program has literally gives anybody the opportunity to do what we're talking about. Find out where your foot pressure, find out where your pelvis is, find out what movements you can do. If you can't, and then put them in and see what happens.
Yeah, and to be honest, Gary, that wake up your glutes series, or I think it's about finding pelvic symmetry and exploring all your 8 options. It's basically my assessment technique. As simple as that. What are you doing in your feet? can you move your pelvis in the 8 directions? And if I've got half an hour and that's all I can do, I'll find plenty of stuff to get started on just in that 30
You'll find so much. Yeah.
Yeah.
It actually can be overwhelming. You can do a handful of very simple movements and realise, oh, actually, there's a lot here going that I can't do.
Yeah.
And, you know, as Chris would say, we just have to get to work.
Yeah, and choose one that you feel like you can improve and start there and see what else lets go in the process of doing that. So what is your own, have you had a personal back pain story? Have you experienced back pain yourself?
Yes, I was I skied. I did a lot of skiing, and I had a lot of ankle injuries from football, which I stopped playing football and then began skiing. And towards the end of my ski series, so seasons, I was about 2003 or 4. At which point, by this time, I was kind of unable to lie in my bed, or, you know, to get out of bed on the morning would be a rolling out onto the floor to spend half an hour trying to stretch and move in order to get myself up and on my feet and have a. So I'm very much aware, and that went on for months,
Wow.
if not years. And I remember having to, you know, when I'm off season, I went back to play football. I'd have to make sure I got up in the morning and do like 2.5 hours of yoga and stretching just to be in any relevant position, proper warm-ups. If I didn't warm up, my calf would rip on the right hand side. So I knew that there was, and this was me all in my learning phase, really, because the learning kicked in. I'm very passionate about people taking ownership of their own body, and that's partially because I went and did the rounds myself looking for help, but I wasn't really afforded any. I was given as much help as I asked for, but there wasn't really any forthcoming solutions. It was only really the understanding of what my body is doing. This drove me to that, and then that just moving gently, quietly, curiously was actually what got me out of pain. And I can hand on heart say that I've been so 15 years, it's been a 15-year journey since I first really got involved with this type, what I think is this type of work. And I think I was doing it before because I was interested in the feet and working with them for 20 years now, but 15 years of getting an idea that I can actually really help myself. And it's been 15 years of peeling back the layers of the onion. I would say none of this happened overnight. Overnight, you can get miracle results that will make you feel amazing, but the journey doesn't end there, because you're going to move into another compensatory pattern and another one. And I've had, my injury list is extensive, but I feel like I've been spending those years ticking them off one at a time.
Wow. Wow.
And they don't really hurt. Old injuries don't hurt, but so they don't get treated, but they're still an obstacle in your system that you're moving around. And we really would like to help people heal properly those old injuries to be able to give us that sense of. You mentioned the ankle, or if the ankle injuries that I had, it was 13 ankle ruptures in 13 years, from the age of 13 to 26. Like, it was just one. So that was when I just had to go, I just can't do this game anymore. And so what you realize is the idea of actually putting your weight on that foot eventually just isn't something you choose to do. So everything, you're now living a life on the left. But the ankle, of course, wasn't hurting. It was the back, it was the neck, it was the shoulder. And then one day you invite yourself to start bearing weight. You start investigating the ankle sprains, the ligament damage, and you start working on the ankle. It gives permission for your body to bear weight a little bit more. That gives the pelvis a little chance of leveling, and you can start to move into it. And it's interesting as well, because talking about movement habits, but I've been teaching with like a right leg forward position and bending my weight into my right leg, as you've seen me do hundreds of times. And doing that, and then one day, having done that 1,000 times, trying to think. So one day, I was also born with an umbilical hernia, and one day I was. This was 5 years ago, working around something in the back, and came around to my belly button and went, oh, I did have that hernia thing, and I just breathed into my belly and put my weight in the right leg, and burst into tears. It was like, whoa, I totally wasn't expecting that. So the connecting the two together had allowed me to actually get into my right foot a bit more. I mean, this is quite out there stuff, and after years of investigation, these are the places you can end up. But I've been demonstrating in front of people for years, but had never actually done it properly until this day. And then I remember walking around the supermarket going, oh, actually, what I teach is there. So it's actually happening in my body. It's amazing. So,
I'm actually really glad you had so many injuries as a kid, because do you think you would have been that invested in figuring it out if you hadn't had those experiences?
No, of course not. I
Right.
wouldn't. No, absolutely.
And I think what I'd love people in back pain to think is, maybe, and I've seen it, this pain is an opportunity, because if you can understand these basic concepts about your body now, at whatever age you're at, the pain is what gives you the opportunity to explore. And in the exploration, you can learn some pretty important stuff that's going to mean the next chapter of your life is hopefully a hell of a lot more improved in terms of pain, in terms of function. And everyone gets old and wants to, all of a sudden, I've noticed 60-year-olds start paying attention when you talk about movement flow, movement ease, movement grace, because they notice they're losing it. No one in their 40s wants to talk about that because they've still got it. So I just love that your pain created what you're doing now effectively, didn't it?
It certainly did, yeah. And I was just going to add to what you're saying, is that movement flow and ease is something I wanted in my 20s, but have easily in my 40s.
Interesting. So, why did you want it in your 20s? For your sporting performance?
No, because I just couldn't get out of bed.
Oh, okay, gotcha. Yeah, because you're in pain.
It took me hours to get going, and then I did what 20-year-olds did and cracked on. So I didn't, but I know anybody who was skied with me then would ski with me now. I'm a completely different athlete. Yeah. And I'm just too old to be the athlete now, but I'm actually younger than I was physically when I was actually doing it. So it's super interesting. I think, age is a number that goes up, but what you do with your body and the possibilities you create for it are, we should never lose sight of that.
And I think it's interesting that AIM is applied most often to people in pain wanting to find resolution of injuries and rehabilitate. But I mean, personally, I've used it intensely in my running for movement efficiency, which has helped my performance. So, any triathlete out there or any athlete looking to optimize performance, there's the same stuff that gets you out of pain is what makes you compete at that little extra 5 to 10% of efficiency. And I don't think, Gary, I don't think the athletic world is fully, you're the secret weapon that they need.
Well, a few use it, but it keeps you on the track as well, is what I would try to interject there. So not only are we talking about picking you up. So I work with a high-end athlete at the moment I'm thinking of, who basically said he never thought he would play a game pain-free in his life again.
Yeah.
Mid-20s, and is now actually playing games pain-free.
Wow.
Not only is he pain-free, but his performance, his body shape, his ability to put on muscle and everything has improved through the whole thing. So then his longevity, his periods without injury have just got longer and longer and longer and longer, rather than every third week, every fourth week. It's a no-brainer. But a lot of the athletes out there are running around in their foot pressure posture that we talked about, and nobody's interjecting with that. And they're getting really, really good and really strong at being in that place because they train super hard and they've got a mindset, but they do break down. And you get a lot of injuries that are unnecessary, hamstrings popping, no pressure, or ACLs go with under no, that's a knee ligament going under no like impact. That it shouldn't happen. It can only happen in a compromised structure. Yeah. And then people also want to blame the cleats or the studs and yeah, hang on, this was a knee that wasn't in the right position in the first place.
Yeah.
So super interesting. It, of course, the book What the Foot has, which if anybody's listening, is primarily for practitioners rather than for the lay person, but a lot of people have said they've enjoyed it and benefited from it. But on the front, it's about the journey from pain to performance. So it isn't about that one end, but you're right, that is the one that is the most appealing use of it, I would say.
And so, look, I'm mindful of time here. If when I say that term bulletproof back, what do you think? What are your thoughts? What comes to mind? What does it look like to you?
So remember the little conversation about the vertebrae being stuck open on one side?
Yep.
A bulletproof back for me would the spine itself would have the capacity to open on one side, close on the other, and close on the open side and open on the other. And for that to happen in all of the vertebrae, not just in one sequence. And that does a few things. The muscle tissue that spans the bones on that side, when we open on one side, that muscle gets a chance to stretch or lengthen, and the muscle on the other side gets a chance to contract or shorten. And then the journey from one to the other means that muscle gets a chance to lengthen and the other side shorten. So the muscles are able to experience their range along with the joint. In the previous conversation, open on one side, close on the other. Muscles are short, tight, muscles are stretched, and muscles stretched. Some people say they're long and weak, that they will be super tight, working super hard not to let that joint open anymore, because we're moving into serious areas of risk. So those muscles get really tight. The other side can get really tight. The movement is limited. So movement capacity comes back to the ability of being able to access both sides equally. And then if we take that, I've just talked about one dimension. So that's what we call the frontal plane, side bending left and right. The same conversation, front and back. So if I extend my spine and stretch my abdominals, the joints open on the front, close on the back. If I flex my spine into a slumpy slouch, they open on the back and close on the front. So if I'm stuck in either one of those spheres, we have the same long, short conversation. And so freedom comes from the ability to be able to move both ways, close both sides, and then also evenly rotate in both ways. And in order to do that, you have to have your pelvis level. So that's the pelvis being able to do all of its things. And so a bulletproof back is part of a bulletproof body. And it's the ability for all of the joints to be able to do all of the things that they, I'm going to say, designed to do, because the bones have a shape that has determined all of this work. So the shape of the bones both limit the movement allowed and allow the movement to a limit. So we can determine what is too much range, what is too little range. And if everything's moving to its optimum range, you have these very specific organized shapes that we can move our body into. And so the less tension you have in areas of the back due to the ability to evenly open and close joints on all sides, the more bulletproof it's going to be.
I love it.
The thing that I couldn't remember what I was going to say that I want to say now is we do this whole stable thing, being stable. And the little story that I have is, I remember she was a yoga teacher, bless her, and she stood on a force plate at the front of the class. And we looked at her pressure distributions, and her pressure distributions were not great. I think she was expecting, as a good yoga teacher would, 50% left and right, 25% in all quadrants. And she was a bit shocked at what she saw, to be honest, because she was very focused on her alignment. So she said, I can do that. And I thought, okay, have a go. So she jumps back onto the plate, and she put herself into a perfect, beautiful Tadasana, like shoulder blades, everything perfectly aligned and upright. And the force plate went chaos. She was all over the place. Her alignment, her balance, her pressures completely changed. And she was shocked, because it should have got better in her mind. But the idea of putting effort into her body to make it more stable made her readings just even worse. They went haywire. And what I realized over time is that by having more access to mobility, more access to movement in the way I've just described, the way we've described the pelvis, the way we've described the feet, what you find is that when you stand them on the force plate, the amount of movement occurring in the body is vastly reduced, which means they have got more stable. So stability, stabilizing shouldn't be an effortful journey. We want to explore where we naturally find ourselves more stable, because there's less chaos happening in the system.
Yeah, and it's an irony, isn't it, that to create more stability you need more mobility, and that's quite cool. It's quite funny that, well, I just can't, every time, why, as you're speaking, I'm just thinking of your rule: joints act, muscles react. And we kind of, I think, have been trained, lots of us trainers and therapists have been trained in the opposite idea, that muscles contract, joints react. And, it's certainly flipping my brain 180 on that was hugely useful, hugely useful. And
Yeah.
I love the idea that I can, by focusing on the movement, I'm re-educating and retraining all the muscles anyway. I don't need to provide one stretch for one muscle and one activation for another muscle. I
You
can,
don't,
by putting someone in the right position, customized for them and what their body's doing. I
yeah,
don't need a list of exercises, stretch this way and hold it for 1 minute. And like, it's all there. They get everything they need in one or two movements that wakes up the right thing, lengthens the right thing,
yeah,
retrains the pressure into the foot in the right direction. And, that's time efficient movement for most people who, let's face it, they're time poor with their movement principles. They want quick results and they want it now. And, I love that your method allows me to give that to people more efficiently than having them do a core retraining program, which is just long term not going to really do much. But
yeah.
yeah,
I absolutely love that you've said that. I couldn't have put it better myself. The time efficient movement thing, and I think people are more likely to do something that is effectively less that gives them more than having a list of more that will give them ultimately less, and that's why people give up on their programs so easily.
yeah.
So I think you've said that perfectly.
Well, that's actually your mate Rangan's concept. I heard him in a podcast talk about the power of 5 minutes, and
Yeah,
you know,
his new book,
that,
his second book.
you what? Sorry.
I said that's his new book, and then I realised no, that was his book last Christmas. There's another new book coming now.
There's another one. Yeah, but I just love it. Gives people a 5 minute challenge. Like just
You can do.
5 minutes is huge for your nervous system to relearn something that affects how you move. So the thing, I think, people in back pain, they never start something because there's a perception it's going to be hard, it's going to take a lot of time, it's going to take a lot of energy. And if you've been in pain, you're already very energy depleted, very demotivated. There's not much energy left in the tank for taking on a core retraining program. But what I want people to understand is, with this approach, it could be as easy as 5 minutes learning something new and then just going for a walk. It could be that
Yeah,
simple. And I think it's important for people in these pathways to be hopeful that perhaps they just haven't found the right nugget of learning yet, and that might just be just around the corner. And sounds like you had pain, you had a learning, you took control of your own, it directed you in a whole new path that created a whole career for you. And yeah, that's just superb. I love that. I love that, because I'd like to think that this pain is serving us, and it's for our own benefit ultimately. But no one in pain really wants to hear that.
I don't want to hear that. No.
So I don't say that too often.
The this work, just to underline something you were saying, is actually very slow, very gentle, very specific, and if everybody went into it with that mindset, they'd probably get more results. But there's still a level of even coming to this work. They'll listen to this program, buy that program, which is really cheap, by the way.
Gary, I'm going to I'll put it in the links. Don't you worry. I'm a big fan.
Oh, no, I'm joking.
We'll put it all out there.
We want to help us, reach educate as many people as we can. Hence the price. But jumping in, it sounds amazing. I'm so desperate to cure my back pain. I've tried everything. Let's give this a go, and then go at it 90 miles an hour, and that, it kind of still doesn't serve it. So the work itself is gentle, slow, specific. It's exploratory. But you have to go inside. Some people struggle to go inside and be a bit introspective, and so it's engaging them all in that space where they can do it. But on the back of it is a true learning about how your body should move, and we can pretty much guarantee that doing it, if you've got a level of clarity, you will bump into the things that of those things you should be able to do, the ones you can't do, and then simply enjoy those movements for a while to rewire your own brain. And there's a part at the end where the bigger body movements, where these movements all come together, can be enjoyed as well. But it's not to rush through. And as I've said myself, even with all of my knowledge and learning from it now, I'm still looking after my own body after 15 years. I'm able to do so much more with it now than I was back then. But it doesn't mean that I'm completely out of the woods. I don't have pain and discomfort on a daily basis, but I still have limitations in my structure. I've had some breaks, I've had some fractures, so they all play out. So I just have to now look after them, and it's the understanding that enables me to do that. So the journey out is tough, and the road might be long, but it's certainly more enjoyable than where you're currently stuck.
Yeah. So on that, what are your top 3 tips for someone listening now who's sort of stuck in that pain cycle and wishing to explore some options?
I think I kind of just said it, actually.
Just say it again.
Number 1 is you probably feel like you've tried everything and no one's been able to help. And that's because the only person who's truly able to help is you. And so number 1 is to take ownership of your own body. I wrote a free ebook where people can read about my ideas around that.
I didn't know that. Where can they find that? Can we put that in the links as well?
I'll send you a link to it. It's also on my Instagram highlights, and it will soon be on the website.
Okay.
My Instagram @GaryWard_AIM, you know that, don't you? On the highlights, you can find that. Anyway, it's a little ebook about introducing the idea of taking ownership of your body. And that's not to say that we have to abandon all therapists and therapists can't help, but you hold hands and work together rather than rely on them to work on you. Number 2, in that taking ownership of your body, you have the opportunity to educate yourself around your body, understand what it should be doing. Hopefully this has been educational in a sense of talking about the movement possibilities in the spine and where your foot pressures are, and just learning what that is for you and what then you are able to do with that. And 3 is to gently start putting back what we call what's missing. So as you understand that these movements are not part of your easy access, you engage in them every single day on a gentle movement level. And the hope is that there are areas of your body that you can't access, that you will be able to access easily, and those movements will come back. And slowly your body changes its shape and morphs into a new shape, different to the old one. The foot pressures change. They don't necessarily go back to perfect. They change, and then everything changes. And so the more you know, and the more you inform yourself, the more you're able to go down this process. And what happens towards the end of the process is you end up bumping into the joints that are the really what's the word? I want to say
gnarly.
Yeah, stuck. They're being a bit of a swine, and they won't let go. And then you can be like, oh, you know what, I did do this to that joint at that point, at some point in time, and maybe that's where I want the therapist to hold my hand and work with me on with getting that to happen. And then I'll go home and I can do my work again. And that's why we you know, on both levels, I enjoy teaching the practitioners, engaging them in new ideas and new skills, but also educating the people. Everybody has a body, like a therapist. The therapists don't come onto our courses pain-free. They're all in as much trouble as everyone else, and we're giving them the opportunity to take ownership of their own body as well, learn about their body in a different way, move their body in a different way, and point, you know, moving everyone to a position of finding their own center, their own most balanced point that suits them best for now. And hopefully the journey for everyone is there's beautiful light at the end of the tunnel.
Yeah, and that just touches on a final point that, you know, I think my first experience of your course was a very intellectual one, like understanding the model, and it was all in my head and trying to understand your language and the words, and then the second time was about putting it in my own body and sensing and feeling and experience it for myself. And I certainly think that, you know, there's that intellectual learning and then there's the embodied knowing. And I think without the two, you're not as effective as a teacher. I think to spend the time putting it in your own system helps you on some level communicate it better in whatever way. It makes a big difference to be able to have experienced what that person before you is experiencing with their blocks. And so in a way, you can't learn these things from a book, can you? You have to spend the time on the mat yourself, playing and noticing and feeling. And it takes both to be a good practitioner, I think.
Well, I'm noticing that for any practitioners are learning. So we're obviously, with the 2020, the way 2020 is, teaching online is the way forward. But watching a video puts you straight into that intellectual space. And doing support calls for the people listening to this work, you realise that they didn't even get to the first step of trying to embody it. They're taking it straight to the clients, taking ownership of their clients in an intellectual way, and it's very difficult for them to make those steps. Also, they're very young in it. They've also only seen like half a day's of what we would do on a course. Right. And so to any therapists out there who want to engage in the online material, we have a long process of education that we have to build to put out there online. But what you just said, the key to this is to take what you have learned in an online place and really embody it in your body. And if you can't feel the muscles that we talk about loading when you put yourself into a position, you need to let yourself know that you are not in that position and that there are obstacles holding you back, and you've actually got some work to do. And so it's not about taking this work and saying, everybody put the right leg forward, bend the knee, now put your left leg forward, bend your knee. You're going to miss, absolutely, you're going to miss the boat completely. This is a very specific journey, a very slow, gentle journey, as I've already said. And the more time you spend trying to, in inverted commas, perfect these movements for yourself, just explore them more and more fully each time, the more joy everyone will have. So the famous phrase for our work is, it's really, really simple, but not necessarily easy.
You're right. It is incredibly simple, but incredibly complex sometimes. And anyway, that's the joy of it, hey? And nothing worth knowing is easily learnt. I think committing time to a practice means you eventually see layers and depths to it that you wouldn't see if you took a fleeting glance at it. But it's an amazing body of work, Gary. And I didn't know your personal injury pain story, but I'm really grateful that was your early childhood experience.
Yes.
So many people have benefited from it. So to that young boy having all those ankle sprains, well done. It was great.
Jumping into a peat bog in the Peak District. That set it all off.
That's right. Off. Yeah. All right. Well, thank you for your time, and I'm so glad we finally got this done. And
thank you so much, man. Brilliant.
Yeah, we'll get those links off you so that all the listeners can have access to your Wake Up the Glutes series and that little ebook that you mentioned, and basically just your website for practitioners who might be interested in doing your coursework, which, having done hundreds of courses, yours and Chris is top of the pops. That and Feldenkrais, which, to be honest, there's such a big overlay, but they're just two of the most valuable bodies of work I've come across yet. So
thanks, Marion. Can I just say, Wake Up Your Glutes was what we did in Rangan's book, Dr. Rangan Chatterjee's book, which we can for those two. And then there's Wake Your Body Up, which is the program we've been talking, and Wake Your Feet Up, which is they work together. Obviously, one is focusing on the lower leg and one focusing on the upper body, and they team up eventually.
Yeah, great. You'll at some point through that series, you'll be waking up.
Yeah.
Eventually you wake up. All right. Thanks, Gary.
You're welcome. Thank you, Marion. Take care.